Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I'm going to be trying out Bon Appetit's recipe for double, and by double I mean triple, chocolate chip cookies. So a while back, Rick Martinez posted a picture on his Instagram of a new chocolate chip cookie that he was working on. Since seeing that picture, I have been craving a super intense chocolatey cookie, but the recipe hasn't been posted yet. So in the meantime, I'm testing out BA's other chocolate chip cookies to see how they work out. So I do these Bon Appetit recipe tests every single Wednesday. If you like this one, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Without any further ado, let's see how this goes. As always, I'll leave a link to the recipe and ingredient quantities in the description box below. The first step to prepping the raw ingredients is toasting up some raw sunflower seeds, letting them cool, and then grinding them into a powder. Prior to making this recipe, I actually didn't have a spice grinder or a coffee mill, so I had to spend about $25 to buy one for this recipe. So if you don't want to spend that $25 on something that you may not use again, you can skip this entire process, just leave the sunflower seeds out of the recipe, or you could buy pre-ground almond meal or a pre-ground flax meal, spread it on a baking tray, toast it at 350 just like the recipe says, and use that instead. It's going to give you the same kind of nutty background flavor, and honestly, the sunflower seed flavor really didn't come through too much in the cookie because there's a lot of other good stuff going on here. Next, I'm moving on to prepping the rest of the dry ingredients. So this is kind of business as usual for making a cookie recipe. The recipe didn't specify whether to use Dutch process or natural cocoa, so I'm using Dutch process because I prefer the darker, richer, chocolatey cocoa flavor. However, either one will work just fine in this recipe. So if you've ever eaten a chocolate cookie and wondered how they got a super rich and fudgy chocolatey flavor into it, you're about to find out. So this recipe calls for 3 full bars of chocolate to be melted down and mixed into the cookie dough. So the chocolate flavor we're getting from these bars is a huge part of the recipe, so be sure to buy a nice quality chocolate that's something that you enjoy eating, because you really are going to taste it in the recipe. So next up is kind of the normal cookie assembly method. I'm taking my room temperature butter, both of my sugars, popping it onto my stand mixer with the paddle attachment. As always, I'm using the scraper beater that came with my mixer, so that does a good job of scraping the edges of the bowl. It really speeds up the mixing process for me and gets a lot of air incorporated into the butter sugar mixture much more quickly than having to stop and scrape the bowl every couple minutes. So once the mixture is pale and light and fluffy, we're going to add our 2 large eggs, one at a time, doing a really thorough mix between each addition, so you don't want to see any yolk streaks remaining. So once both of those eggs are totally incorporated, we can go ahead and stream in our slightly cooled melted chocolate mixture. Now it is important that this melted chocolate is down to about room temperature, otherwise you're going to melt your butter. So make sure that that chocolate has had ample time to cool down some, and you can see the beautiful texture of the mixture at this point. It looks like a buttercream frosting, which kind of is exactly what this is actually. It's butter, sugar, and chocolate. So we've essentially got a chocolate buttercream that we're now adding our prepared dry ingredients into. And once you've got those dry ingredients in, you want to mix just long enough to get all of them incorporated. You definitely don't want to overwork this and create a tough cookie situation for yourself. First, I'm adding in some unsweetened coconut flakes, and this is the same type of coconut I used in the chocolate macaroon cake that I tested, which was outstanding. Next, I'm adding in my semi-sweet chocolate chips and my white chocolate chips, and then using a rubber spatula or a wooden spoon, you just want to mix this to get the ingredients kind of evenly dispersed throughout the dough. So again, you don't want to overwork it, just make sure everything is kind of evenly incorporated. So this recipe calls for a really generous sized cookie. I normally use my OXO medium cookie scoop, which is 1.5 tablespoons. This recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of dough per cookie. So I bought a new scoop for it. If you don't want to buy a new scoop, you could definitely use just a 1/4 cup measuring scoop, or just use 2 of any smaller cookie scoop. If you use less dough than a 1/4 cup, your baking time is probably going to be a little bit less. So I let these cook for a total of 17 minutes. They looked slightly underdone when I pulled them out of the oven, but you let these cool completely on the tray, so there will be quite a bit of carryover cooking. The cookies are out of the oven, I've let them cool completely, and this is the finished product. So I really like how the surface of the cookie is a little bit craggy. You can see the different chips, the coconut kind of poking through, and of course the flaky sea salt on top just makes it look really appealing. So I am super excited to dig into this and see how it tastes. So let's do the break here. So it looks like it'll be a little bit chewy here. I'm gonna texture inside. It looks pretty dense. Let's see. There's so much texture happening in this cookie. The different kinds of chips, the coconut, the sea salt, the crispy outside, the chewy inside. Even the coconut is multi-textural, where the coconut that's inside the cookie is still kind of chewy, but the coconut that's peeking out got crispy and brown like toasted coconut. There's a lot going on here, a lot of good stuff going on here, and so I'm really happy with this cookie overall. I really hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.